Okay, we'll call this work session to order. July 26, 2021, it's 4:31. Start with the Finance Committee update.
Chairman Lyons, I'll go ahead and take the lead on this one. So if you all wanted to follow along, the agenda report is posted to board docs. As you all likely know, back in March, the federal government approved $1.9 trillion for the American Rescue Plan Act for 2021. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as the ARP money or ARPA money. This legislation established the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, and this is meant to address the COVID-19 pandemic to include its impact on public health and the economy. Specifically, this provided $65.1 million into that fund for direct aid to counties across the country. For Rockbridge County, we were allocated $4,384,541. On June 2nd, the U.S. Treasury sent what's called our first tranche. So our first allocation came down, $2,192,270.50. So the second tranche is going to come a year later. So we're looking at June 2022. We set up a separate fund. So you can see it's Fund 205, the ARPA fund. And that's where we'll be accounting for both revenues and expenditures moving forward. There are some general guidelines that were provided regarding this money. And you can see the first one is to respond to the public health emergency with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic or its negative economic impacts. So I think for us, we'd probably want to underline economic impacts because that's something that we'll be looking at moving forward. Also, it allows for us to provide premium pay to essential workers that are responding to the COVID-19 health emergency. Primarily, this would be a premium pay for individuals in those eligible positions. And then we also have the opportunity to basically make up for lost revenues that were as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll get into this just in a little bit. And then lastly, to make any necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So those are the four primary categories. There are some key dates that the National Association of Counties has identified in the legislation. The first one is August 31st. It's the deadline for counties to submit their first interim report to the U.S. Treasury. October 31st is the deadline for counties to submit the first quarterly project and expenditure report. And then you can see that all funds must be incurred or obligated by December 31st, 2024. Notice it says incurred or obligated. So that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be expended. As you can see in that next bullet, all the funding has to be expended by December 31st, 2026. So as long as it's committed and are obligated by December 31st, 2024, we can continue to expend those dollars through 2026. So the Finance Committee has met a few times over the last few months, and we've developed just kind of a general areas that we've primarily discussed and focused on. So the first one is previous revenue reductions. And so I've got one data point and then just another comment that we're still working on developing the actual estimate for revenue reduction. So the Government Finance Officers Association, they developed a revenue loss calculator, put it out on their website. So a lot of localities are using it. And basically what it's doing is you're looking at fiscal years 2016 to 2019. And then you're looking at the calendar year 2020. And there's a percentage, 4.1% estimate revenue growth that goes into the calculation. So they look at prior years and then that year, calendar year 2020, to determine what that estimate is for lost revenue, again, based on a 4.1% revenue growth calculation. So I've plugged in the county's data points. And so for the county, we're looking at potentially $1,259,000 $533. So again, $1,259,533. Now the same, I think it was, maybe I wrapped it up the Thursday of last week. The very next day on the Virginia GFOA crosstalk platform, there was discussion about whether localities, specifically counties, can use the school division's revenues in the calculation. And someone was able to find some language that says you can. So I'm working with David Daniels at the school division to determine what that calculation would look like if we included the revenues for the school division. And so it could be potentially significant or an increase in addition to what I've already told you. So at this point, I don't have that information. I'm working with David or Mr. Daniels to make sure I've got the accurate data and what that calculation is. So after that, we get into broadband, and you can see in parentheses, I put state funding option is on the radar. So you probably know, I think it was announced about 10 days ago, the state or the governor had mentioned that the state is setting aside about $700 million in ARPA money at the state level to expand broadband into the rural areas of Virginia. So I know Mr. Suter could expand on this, but I know he's been working like he does all the time, pretty hard behind the scenes on trying to maximize the effort to potentially use some local money and some state money to make some things happen here in the county. So I don't know if you want to expand on that, Mr. Suter.
I can expand a little bit on that. Been working with the EDA, with RANA, with BARC, with Dominion, with as many folks as I can. I've had some conversations with Comcast, and essentially they're have to do a letter of intent by tomorrow, a non-binding letter of intent by tomorrow, 11:59, I believe, tomorrow evening, as to the county's intention to apply for these funds. And of course, we're going to, we want to apply for as many funds as we can to expand broadband. One of the issues that, or not one of the issues, but one of the things to for them to consider, or that they consider when they're looking at these applications, is how much local match there is, and it can be in-kind match with an ISP, an internet service provider, building part of it. It can be the county putting money in, and you can put match from the ARPA funds in to maximize the match from the money that the state has set aside for this. So we're still looking at options, but I just need to let them know that, yes, we're going to apply, but then we're working on a plan about how we're going to do that and what the actual cost might be between now and September 14th. September 14th is the Vatti application deadline. And I apologize, I can't remember exactly what the acronym stands for, but it's State Broadband Commission, and they will be looking at applications from across the state. We have been successful in the past. There's a fair to middling chance that we would work with the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission again to assist in the application and grant management. I will say that right now, with the staffing that we have to work on this type of thing, it's pretty much me that is working on it, and then where Vicky plugs into that in a lot of places. But it does help having the CSPDC, especially after you get to the grant management piece of it. So that's a nutshell on the broadband.
Thanks, Mr. Suter. After that, you'll see we've got a kind of a placeholder for county infrastructure and CIP projects. Again, anything that's related to what's eligible. I will say that late last week, we did get a request from staff to potentially consider a comprehensive housing study. I know that's not really a CIP project, but it could be a regional effort if the two cities are interested in supporting as well, using their ARPA money. The goal is to gain an idea of how the region can increase the supply and the access and improve sustainability for affordable housing in the region. And the estimate on that was $45,000. That was based on a project or an effort that was done by Bath County. After that, you'll see that we've got school division improvements. The school division has $4 million in ARPA money that they have received, or I believe it's held up at the state, and then they have to apply for it. But I know the executive committee met last month, or maybe it was May, no, it's June. And they plan to meet the next couple months to discover about how to collaborate and basically leverage both sets of money that the county and the school division have used to support potentially improvements to HVAC replacements. And I think there's three. And if you look at their CIP, it's I think Natural Bridge. I forget what the other one is. Maybe Mountain View, and then Effinger Central Office is all in the CIP. So that's a possibility looking forward. We've also discussed some regional collaboration with agencies like the PSA and the MSA and so forth. Late last week, we also got a request from the PSA for a sewer capacity study, and they're estimating that it to be about $120,000. And so that's something fairly new. The Finance Committee has not actually looked at that one or the housing study at this time. Those came pretty late last week. And then we've also discussed the nonprofits. And so there's a couple items to look at when it comes to nonprofits. As you know, back in 2021 and of course in 2022, the decision was made to cut them 10% compared to the 2020 budget. And so that was around a 35,000 plus range in cuts that were provided to the nonprofits. And those were carried over into the FY22 budget. So we've discussed that as well. So that's on the radar. And then we did get a request from Valley Associates for Independent Living, VAIL. Now we don't fund VAIL in our operational budget, but they typically have been submitting requests for funding in the past. And so they did send us some information to consider for the use of ARPA money. The three main things that came out of it was the potential to modify homes for those individuals with disabilities, especially with the focus on seniors. And then a request to make playground equipment more accessible. And then just any support to community-based organizations that support individuals with disabilities in general. So with that, it's still a plan, it's still a spend plan in progress. And so we'll be meeting the next few months to discuss and firm up the plan. So the purpose of this report was just to assess the board's thoughts on just kind of broad expenditure categories that I've discussed tonight. It's not a priority list. Again, it's really just a soft list, mostly just discussion points. And so there are some of these projects that involve, the cities or say the PSA or MSA. There's going to have to be some further discussion and coordination on that moving forward. So with that, we're here to answer any kind of questions that the board may ask. And just like we've discussed previously, if there's any inputs from the board members to the Finance Committee, so Supervisor McDaniel, Supervisor Lewis, please communicate that to them and they'll communicate that down to Mr. Suter and I. So Mr. Suter, I don't know if you have anything to expand or add.
When y'all get done.
I actually had a conflict at the last meeting, so I was not at the last meeting of the Finance Committee. I was meeting on another topic with another board member elsewhere. So, but Steve briefed me after that meeting.
So Supervisor Lewis wants to comment.
Yes, sir. In regards to the nonprofits, I think it's important to note for 2021, when that original decision was made, there were funds, I believe $150,000 from CARES money held at the community foundation, and nonprofits and small businesses alike were able to apply for that. So that's just a side item, but I think it addresses some of the 2021 nonprofit funding. And then also, just thoughts on this stuff as we go forward. Mr. Suter's suggestion or the suggestion of broadband funding, is an interesting situation because it's a scenario where we're able to leverage the dollars that we do have. So, that's another concept that to me is important. And also, as we know, guidance changes, the opportunities change just as we go along with this, and the timeline's not as short as the CARES money was. So I think, we're doing the right thing and studying it and thinking about it and going to come up with the best plan that as a board we can.
Steve, the one question I had, when you mentioned affordable housing and the study that was done, I know that was brought up at the EDA, and I'm not sure if the EDA brought that forward to you, but I know the EDA has funds as well, and I know they had talked about it. So I'm not sure if that's some sort of collaboration between supervisors and EDA, or the EDA is planning to pay for that themselves, or do you have any?
It was a direct request that came through Brandy Flint. And so I don't know if she was doing that on behalf of the EDA. And I think, Mr. Suter, you were at that meeting.
Yes, we were at the same meeting. So yes, but what they're kind of modeling it after, and I asked Brandy Flint to put forward something so that there's clarity on what the deliverables would be, something that everybody could at least look at to see, A, is it something that we want to do? B, if so, where would the funds be allocated from, to your point, part, EDA or these funds, the ARPA funds? And 3, does it make sense to do something regionally? So she's pulling that information together now. But I did ask her when this first came up to at least put it in for some consideration at the Finance Committee level.
Can the studies themselves be paid out of the ARPA funds?
I'm going to have to defer that to our auditors. To me, it can be related to potentially for infrastructure, at least on the PSA request.
Mm-hmm.
The housing study, I'd like to get our auditors to give me some thought on that as well.
Okay.
The only other thing I think that's come up repeatedly through the Finance Committee is, that these are one-time funds that should be used for one-time projects, not a reoccurring cost that will affect future budgets. So that's one of the things that we've been looking at. And when you look at the list of the 30,000 foot view, that's basically what you see there is one-time projects that we could possibly use this money for.
Anything else? Thank you. Personnel Committee?
Yes, in Supervisor Days, not everyone will make it this evening, but I did want to bring something back up for you all, and I'll just give you a brief background. So back in November, you may recall that the board approved bonuses for emergency responders, including law enforcement and fire rescue positions. And a number of localities in our region ultimately then provided bonuses to all employees at varying levels. Some localities provided more, and when I say all employees, I mean administrative staff, constitutional offices, that type of thing. The cities of Lexington and Buena Vista provided a $1,000 bonus to all full-time staff and $250 to part-time staff. And back in November, when the board was considering this, and just to reiterate, the board approved a $2,000 bonus for all basically frontline staff that were fire, EMS, and law enforcement. And then through the jail commission, another $500 per uniformed jail officer. Then the city of Lexington and city of Buena Vista looked at the administrative folks, $1,000 and $2,500 for, or $250 for full-time, part-time respectively. At that time, this board kind of tabled that discussion until later to see what revenues ended up being as far as doing anything for administrative staff. And that kind of trickled over into the 911 center. So I'm also on the 911 center board, and 911 center is the fiscal agent is the city of Lexington. So the request came up through the 911, the folks at the 911 center staff and the city of Lexington as to, well, is 911 center staff going to get the same bonus, the administrative bonus, as the city of Lexington employees got. And so at the time I told them, well, it's the decision's kind of on hold pending a board of supervisors decision on board staff. And so that came up again in our May meeting of the 911 board. That led to some additional discussion by the personnel committee and also discussion at the finance committee. And staff was asked to present this for additional consideration at a board meeting, which is why we're talking about it now. So if the board was to consider doing something along that line, staff would think that you have to draw a line as to who's eligible. How far back do you reach? And just based on the fact that we look back at the when the approval was made for the fire and rescue and law enforcement staff, we discussed that someone would have to be eligible, or to be eligible for this, someone would have to have been employed November 1st and still be employed as of the date that the board provides a bonus. And again, this is just bringing it back to the board's attention. I believe that the amounts, and this is including constitutionals, and if you added dispatch in, calculated the county's cost of that, the total would be about $81,050 for county staff, and then an additional $98.78 for dispatch, for a total of $90,000, 928. So that's what we came up with to bring back to you for consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. The only other group that I don't think got anything that was in that original group is jail administrative staff. I believe got they didn't get any money. I think administratively the jail gave the 5 administrative staff that they have some annual leave in lieu of a bonus. So we probably want to look at that too. Of course, that would be in consultation with our partners, the 2 cities and the towns.
So when you say look at it, you mean because they got a bonus in a different way, you would or you would not include them?
Well, here's the thing. Ultimately, jail staff got $500 that was kind of driven by the board's decision that went through the jail commission for bonus. I think it went through the jail commission, but they got jail sworn staff got $500. So the administrative positions out there, in lieu of getting $500 cash, because the jail, they're sworn, and that's what the line was. So the administrative staff are not. So they were given some, and I'm not even sure exactly what it was, some commensurate amount of annual leave instead of that. So the idea, and then the jail sworn staff got an additional $500 from the state. So that got the jail sworn staff up to a total of $1,000. And I haven't been able to ascertain yet whether when the state came around and gave the additional $500, whether there was an additional commensurate amount of annual leave given to the other staff. I did make a call today, and they're looking for that information.
At the time I feel like we made a decision not to do the bonuses. It was a wait and see. It was, let's see how we come out of this. And we see how we've come out of this. to me, I think that this is what we should be doing.
And I forgot to mention, and when I went over that, we also did look at seasonals that were employed last summer during COVID and they're still employed, same type of deal. And thought that a recommendation of $100 a piece for them would be a good measure.
So who wouldn't be getting a bonus?
The only ones that I know that regionally, I know social services gave a bonus. I'm not sure, who all else other than the state offices in the court system. I'm not sure if they got anything from the state or not. They're state employees. They're not constitutional, but, and what I'm talking about is, general district and juvenile court and those folks. I do know that they had advocated for some CARES Act money for that purpose. And I wasn't, able to accommodate really discussion on that at the time because the board wasn't looking at anything other than the frontline staff who were out there either wrestling with somebody or transporting sick people to.
So if we move forward with this, what other groups are going to come out and say, you missed me? I can see the school division because they asked what we thought and we kind of told them that wouldn't look real good to be giving bonuses during at this time.
Right, but they're getting a 4%. And I'm not sure, is that what across the board our employees are getting? I mean, what are our employees getting?
3%.
Right, so there is a let.
But I think there's only a couple of school employees that 1% would be equal to $1,000. There aren't many of them.
Yeah, and with the state employees, like Mr. Spencer was talking about, I mean, they're state employees. If to me, if they're going to get a bonus, it needs to come to the state, not locality. And the county school system is not a department of the county. They have their own elected board and they're responsible for their finances. And I would say if they wanted to give something similar to this, they need to find it within their budget.
I agree they need to find it within their budget, but I just want to make sure that we should be supported.
I don't think they ended
everyone
up,
else, not financially supported, but not say, oh, you shouldn't do that. Like,
I mean, that would be their decision, I would think. With the dispatch, since it's multi-jurisdictional, when the cities gave their bonuses last year, did the dispatch get that portion?
No, they didn't. It was a vote of the 911 board, the emergency communications board. And I had to kind of be the guy to say, look, the county funds the majority on the share. And I said, it was going to be very difficult for me, even though I support it. Don't get me wrong. To me, they are the first line of public safety because they're the first one to get the call. But when you apply that filter of, at the time, who was in danger of and being exposed, it was the officers that had no choice but to have close contact, and certainly fire and EMS that had no choice but to have close contact with patients. So though I do consider them to, dispatchers to be at the center of public safety, they were not on that particular front line. So I kind of had to make that case at the time. And so I told them that I could not support it because I would have to, my board would need to support it, you all. So, and at the time there was, as noted in the beginning of this report, the board was putting that on hold. So to answer your question, I think the cities were supportive of it, or, they're members on the 911 board, but understanding that,
So would they be paying a portion of this?
yes, they would.
Okay, so
I'd obviously have to clear this with them, but I really don't think that I think they would be supportive as they were before. So Um, I had the numbers here somewhere, but I don't have them right now, but ours, our piece
Total
of,
is 16,750 and we're paying 9878. So the difference.
and also I will say, I don't want to leave VMI out. VMI has a little, or not a little, but they have a portion of the budget as a partner.
The only reason I mean, the reason I ask is just to be clear that we're only funding our portion.
Correct.
And if to make up the difference, if the other jurisdictions, VMI, cities, whatever, decide to, that's great. If they don't, then that's their decision, not ours.
Any other questions? Fire and rescue.
All right, let's see. Okay, across the board, just like the private sector, we've been seeing increasing challenges in attracting and retaining staff. Our last salary survey was 2014. And since it was so long ago, I asked Heidi Hope to begin a new survey to be prepared for discussion in the FY23 budget process with the board. As noted in your package, though, however, there's a particularly pressing issue currently in the area of fire and rescue. And Chief Ramsey, who's here with us, and also Heidi Hoke and the Fire Rescue Committee have been looking at the challenges currently faced in that area in attracting and retaining staff. And they developed the recommendation in your package for consideration. And I will say Heidi would be here, but she is on annual leave right now. So Chief Ramsey is here to talk about it a little bit and answer any questions you might have.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As Mr. Suter alluded to, we've been working with Fire Rescue Committee, and I believe met with the Personnel Committee as well. I learned of this kind of back in May, beginning of May. I was at a meeting in Richmond, State Chiefs meeting, and kind of listening to what everybody was doing, how salaries were coming up, some as a result of COVID, some as a result of FY22 budget year. And then realized that based on what our current salary was, people coming in the door, that we were falling a little bit short of that. So we come back from that meeting, briefed Mr. Suter on that, and then we talked with the Fire Rescue Committee about that, and then we kind of got to looking with Heidi on where we are and what our partnering jurisdictions were currently at. And as you can see, based on the study, these are current numbers. For our local jurisdictions, we are kind of well below Augusta, Bedford, Botetourt, Amherst, and even a little bit below the city of Lexington at this point with the starting salaries. So coupled with that and the positions that are available for hire in our surrounding jurisdictions, kind of presented a pressing concern that we probably need to look at that and attempt to rectify that in some manner. We know that very difficult to do this right after a budget had already been finalized, and typically we would ask for something like this, like Spencer had mentioned, for the next budget year, but it is a concern. We've already had some employees looking at other jurisdictions just simply because of salary, and we attempted to offer another employee from another jurisdiction a job to come work for us in recent interview processes, and we just couldn't come together on a salary based on what that individual was getting ready to be making in the FY22 budget. So that's kind of where the concern is. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
But you've been unable to fulfill that position.
We were fortunate enough to fill the position. We did another round of interviews, or actually we advertised, I believe, again, and we were able to fill the position. But it wasn't, the first round. So we were fortunate for that, but still presents our concern. I know the jurisdictions around us are having kind of the same trouble that we are. For example, Augusta just, I think they just hired 15 folks. Fortunately, they were none of ours at this point, but could have easily went that direction. But it is a concern that if another opening comes up, whether it be in the city of Lexington or 20 minutes north or south of us, we could potentially lose a very good employee because of they can go and make $4,000 or $5,000 more a year.
Can I give a little more background on that? So, and then Nathan, I'll ask you to kind of go through what the proposal is.
Sure.
But from what I've seen in the discussions I've had, what we saw happening was it kind of starts at the Harrisonburg Rockingham area and moves south into Augusta, and it starts in the Roanoke area and moves north through Vatti as far as when these increases occur. And you can kind of see that in the market analysis that was done there, and Heidi broke it down by position, and then the percentage you'll see on the right, the percent difference by position. So we're an average of 14% below the surrounding localities when it comes to BLS, the entry level position. The other thing you mentioned about Augusta County, you'll see at the top of that fact or this sheet, the comparison, you'll see EMTB recruit. When they're hiring 15 or something in Augusta County, most of those are typically recruits that come in. They're hiring them for not necessarily for their firefighting and EMS skills. They're hiring them off the street, if you will, and then they have a training academy that they put them through. So they hire them at the lower level, and then they bring them on as an EMT BLS. So currently, we're kind of competing against. We're competing for folks that are already trained, that in some cases are in this particular case, we're paying just about what Augusta County is to start. We're paying what Augusta County pays an EMTB recruit. We would train somebody, or we would hire somebody that's already firefighter EMTB for about the same amount of money. So that was just one thing I wanted to point out. Did I misstate anything there, Chief?
No, that's exactly right. And they went to, that's a kind of fresh or new for Augusta too, is hiring for years. They hired folks like we did that was typically already trained, had their EMTB, ALS, whether it be paramedic or intermediate, and then firefighter 1 or 2, and then recognizing that need of difficulty in filling those positions, they started a recruit academy. It's kind of partnered with the 5 jurisdictions north of us, that they bring them on, train them in EMS and firefighting, and then put them out on the street. Once that typically takes 6 to 8 weeks, something like that, to go through that academy. We do not have that luxury at this point. We have to hire folks that are trained. We could have, if we needed to, and we got to that point, that we could have. I'd already started a conversation with them to potentially look at putting some folks in their academy if need be, if we got to that point and was having trouble filling a vacancy. But like I said, we were fortunate to be staffed at this point. To go over the proposal, we looked at several different options initially, because based on the jurisdictions around us, we're kind of such a wide range, 10, 11, 14, 7% below what folks are paying, and you can see the averages there. Our AMTB folks, which is our, basic EMT providers with firefighter training. We're 14% below the average of our surrounding jurisdictions. Our ALS providers are a little bit better, but we're still around 9% below that. And then, as you can see, as we go up into the officer level, we're still below that. So the recommendation is to just do to get us to where we can manage, and we feel like as a manageable level, is to do a 10% across the board, with the exception of my position. And I'll caveat that with the reasoning for that is along the same lines. If approved, we have a couple of positions that we feel that timing would be right to upgrade those positions simply because of duties changing, the growth of our department since we started. One of that of the training lieutenant. At this point, as you all know, teaching the EMT class at the schools, adult EMT class here, managing our quality assurance programs, and just recently has transitioned to, in addition to that, but now responsible for fire training countywide. So that's an additional responsibility of the training lieutenant since he was hired, and then current captain's position with the additional staff to manage emergency management roles. We learned through the pandemic that we just came out of, there was a lot of additional roles that were fulfilled there, and that we will continue to build on for that. So with the additional 10% from a captain, our current captain position, to the proposed deputy chief's position, would bring that up. And then in order to keep those positions separate enough in the pay scale, that's where the 5% of the chief salary increase is proposed. The training lieutenant to the captain's position, as you see there, in order to get that up to the next pay grade, it would be to the grade 17, and then a 15% increase proposed for the training lieutenant. That would bring it up to market value at this point where we're staying. Everybody else would be a 10% across the board increase to get us to where we still be below the average of our jurisdictions in some cases, but we would be right in line with the city of Lexington, which is our closest partner, but we would be close to other jurisdictions at that point.
And I will say too, this is as a result. I sat in on the last Fire and Rescue Committee meeting, which is Supervisors Ayers and Day, and Heidi was in on that one. Heidi Hoke and Nathan, and I think it's fair to say this is a recommendation coming from the.
It is, and it's a recommendation coming from the committee, and really felt strongly that this was the minimum that we should do to hold staff, to keep us from the good staff that we have and not putting us in jeopardy of losing quite a few. Strong recommendation.
Well, I would say this too. I believe this to be true, even though currently we are below market value. I do think that the leadership and the culture that's been developed by Chief and his leadership staff, it goes through the entire organization, and it's I think people like the culture that they have built, and I think they like to work here. But as evidenced by the fact that we know some folks have been looking pretty strongly, and we're having a really hard time getting trained applicants here. I don't think that's going to last forever. And one more thing too, I kind of started with this. We've got some other areas that the market is really driving. I mean, it's in the private sector. People are having trouble finding workers, and we're seeing the same thing in other areas. Some areas it's not too bad, but other areas it is. I mean, we're down a couple mechanics now. We got school coming up and we're having a hard time finding applicants. And when we do, they're not taking the job. So I'm still not quite sure what we're going to do there just yet, but we'll be ready. But there's other areas that we're having trouble too. And that's another reason we're 7 years out now and it's time to do another salary survey comparison.
Well, thank you, Chief. I appreciate the information. I think it's very valuable. The one thing I'd like to see added is that we look at the same thing for our law enforcement officers, because we're losing them as quick as they're trained, and they're going to other localities nearby for quite a bit more money, or quite a lot less paying on insurance premiums. And I think they're vital too. And I'd like to see us look at law enforcement in addition to fire and rescue.
The recommendation is for a change immediately, right?
It is. And
I think I saw somewhere September 1st.
that we did the sheriff's department last year. We took a look at that and they got bumps up.
Well, no, that was the year before last, and there was and I'm going on memory here, but I believe Sheriff Funkhauser asked for a certain amount of money. I believe he got 50% of what he asked for, and in that particular year was very happy to get it and was very appreciative. And but I agree. And then last year they through the state, through the comp board, and through support of locally funded positions by the board of supervisors, they just got a 5% raise starting now, this month. So, but the important thing to note there is that's across the board, across the state. So yes, absolutely. It's awesome that they got a 5% raise, but they're still.
No, I wasn't saying that. I guess what I was saying is that helps stop the bleeding. We're doing the same thing with fire and rescue. And then from what I understood, we would look across our county at all positions, do a wage study, and then fire and rescue included, sheriff's department included.
I think at that time he developed, everyone didn't get an increase. They set some career guidelines and some people did, but they're going out the door quickly. And I think, our firefighters, our EMTs, we have to have them, and we have to have our deputies and law enforcement. I agree we need to look at everything for the future, but I think it's critical in law enforcement also. We need to take care of everybody.
The only other comment I have is that, and it's going to sound harsh, please don't take it that way, but we're sitting here in July. We just came out of budget season. And we knew that these figures, we may not have known exactly, but we knew where they were. This is a discussion should have been in January, February, not July, not when we just started a brand new budget. I agree that, we should pay our employees and be more in line with what surrounding jurisdictions are. But at the same time, we're having to make an adjustment to our budget that we just passed, that we're just starting. And as budget season next year rolls around, this is going to be a reoccurring annual impact, and probably be more than what's suggested right here. So I would encourage you to look through your budget to help offset the cost of this, and when we get to budget season next year.
Any other comments? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take a 10-minute break before starting our 5:30 meeting.
Thank you. He hit mine. Go down. I want to start over.
All right, we'll call this meeting to order. It's now 5:33 on July the 26th. If we could take roll, please.
Supervisor Ayers,
Here,
Supervisor McDaniel,
Here.
Supervisor Lewis,
Don't know what happened there to Mr. Lewis. He just left the meeting.
Okay, well,
Chairman Lyons.
I'm here. If we could all stand, we'll have the invocation and the pledge. Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us together tonight. We ask for the wisdom to make the right decision. We ask that you bless all that are here and that you send us some rain. Yes, in your name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. While the room will be open to the public due to the size of the meeting room and social distancing requirements, no more than 30 attendees other than county staff will be allowed into the room at one time. For the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Executive Order 72, persons who have been fully vaccinated for COVID-19 virus are not required to wear a mask. We'll hold citizen comments near the beginning of the meeting. We'll do our best to take citizens' comments remotely. There are two options for citizens to offer comment. To join by phone, you may dial into one of our numbers listed on the county website. Webinar ID and password are there for your convenience. Citizens wishing to simply view the meeting live or after the fact can do so on the Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors YouTube channel, also available on the county website. If you wish to make a citizen comment as a Zoom meeting participant, you will use the raise your hand feature. You can press the raise your hand button on the bottom of your Zoom window or press *9 if you are calling in by phone. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda will stand as presented. Recognitions and presentation. We have a recognition for Fire and Rescue Award. Chief Ramsey, while you're coming up, please extend our gratitude to all the departments that responded to the fire at the sawmill.
Yes, sir.
They spent an entire day and prevented a lot of where more damage could have been had, and I believe we were injury-free. So
Yes, sir, we were.
congratulate them on their effort.
And I'll certainly do that. And thanks, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, I'd like to recognize this afternoon or this evening, Lieutenant Thomas Andrews. Lieutenant Andrews received the 2021 Central Shenandoah EMS Council Outstanding Pre-Hospital Educator Award, which is defined by the EMS Council as someone that exemplifies an EMS educator's dedication to education of pre-hospital providers. As you are aware, Thomas was hired into our department in July 2019. Since that time, he has proven his dedication to Rockbridge County Fire Rescue. Time and time again, Thomas is committed to ensuring the standard of excellence at both the agency and regional level. Is on many committees throughout the Central Shenandoah region. He's taught multiple EMT classes since his employment that includes high school students and adults. He continues to teach continuing education courses and is available to both career and volunteer members. And I'll add that as soon as he leaves here tonight, he's going over to Rockbridge Bass to do some training on the new state emergency patient care reporting software. And then again, upon request, he takes that time to attend volunteer meetings, assist with both fire and EMS training. Just last week, he spent hours out at Effinger as well, helping those the volunteers out there, along with Andrew Isaacs, which is another one of our members that's working on this transition. Along with training courses, Thomas responds to emergency incidents. He fills vacant shifts on the ambulance as needed, and he takes an active role in training our new employees on EMS protocols, as well as managing the quality assurance program that Thomas himself developed. So by winning this award, Thomas will be in the running for the governor's award at the EMS symposium in November, which is in Norfolk. So this is a pretty this award is nominated by peers to the council regionally, and then the council selects a panel that actually votes on the members that were selected. And so we just wanted to make you all aware that Thomas was awarded the Outstanding Pre-Hospital Educator Award for our region for 2021.
Well, thank you, Lieutenant Andrews. Congratulations. We appreciate your service.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's now time for citizen comments. Has anyone signed up to address the board? And while we're checking, just want to remind everybody that Supervisor Lewis is back on board and participating.
Thank you. Yeah.
No one signed up for citizen comment.
Okay, is anyone requested electronically to address the board?
No, sir.
Okay, then at this time, we will close the citizen comments period. And I will, has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from June 28th meeting? If so, are there any changes to the minutes, or entertain a motion to approve?
So moved?
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second. Ms. Ayers,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
and the chair votes yes. The county appropriation resolution, Mr. Bolster.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. If you go to your financial package on board docs, you'll see there's a memo to start this update. The first section has to do with activities for the Commissioner of the Revenue, for Mr. Weitzel. And so you can see there's 7 items listed. I'll just go ahead and read through those. They continue the effort on preparing the 2021 personal property tax book. He's also issued some summons for business licenses that have not been paid as of March 2021. So that'll be to summons them to his office. They are analyzing new construction assessments as time allows. And then they are continuing efforts on audits of the meals and lodging taxes and short-term rentals. And then, as they do every month, doing the monthly reconciliation with the DMV report. And then he also wanted to mention that he did present the treasurer, Ms. Travato, with the real estate and personal property supplement tax books. And then lastly, they are assisting Wingate with the general reassessment preparations. And it's my understanding that field work was supposed to start today, so this week. If there's no questions for Mr. Weitzel, I'll transition to the treasurer's update. So the first one is debt set-off collections continue. You can see that there's 102 filings that would total $15,382.51. Delinquent real estate letters were sent out on June 21st. And then any delinquent real estate parcels that were in the special program of land use for tax relief that remained delinquent as of June 1st were reported to the Commissioner of the Revenue on June 16th for removal from the program. And then the last two, they prepared the fiscal year-end reports for the Board of Supervisors, and she'll be presenting that next month. And then lastly, the requirement to submit to the Commonwealth Auditor of Public Accounts, their report was completed July 22nd, so last week. So if there's no questions for Ms. Travato, I'll just go ahead and transition to the fiscal services update. So this is taking a look at the budget line, or not the budget line, the revenue versus expense line chart in Word docs. And so it's pretty clear what you see there. Revenues were significantly higher than expenditures, and I'll explain that here. So we ended the fiscal year on the cash basis of accounting to the good of revenues over expenditures at $5,705,916. And that's what that represents, that gap that you see on the line chart. And there were really just a few primary drivers on why revenues were so high. So the first one is the CARES Act money. So you may recall that we did transfer from the CARES Act fund to the general fund to support public safety. So that would be law enforcement, fire rescue, and so forth. And so that was an unbudgeted number. So we had $2,562,035 that was transferred from CARES Act into the general fund. The other thing, if you think back to the sales and use tax, well, really think back to the 2021 budget cycle, we were, I think, about 5 to 6 weeks from our budget adoption meeting for the 21 budget when the pandemic hit in March of 2020. And at that point, we made just some really kind of shot in the dark, just projections. So we made about a 30% cut in sales and use tax. The good news for the county is that we actually performed fairly well. Now, some of this can be contributed to, there was a 3% increase on the lodging tax. And then I think mills went from 4 to 6% in FY 2021. But overall, the sales and use tax was $2,688,408 higher than what we budgeted in FY 21. And so that's a contributing factor. Just those two alone is about $5.1 million. The other one that I'll mention is our real estate taxes came in. It was about 918,000 higher than what was budgeted. So some of that is just our typical real estate tax. At this point in time, I can't tell you if it's a combination of assessed values being higher on certain things, like new construction or renovations, or if it was just our collection levels were higher than, say, the previous year. But I do know that the delinquency receipts were up 146,000 compared to last year. And then also the rollback taxes were up 49,000 compared to 2021. So all of that was contributed to real estate being higher than budgeted by about $918,000. So with that, those are the three main revenues that impacted us coming out. Again, $5,705,916 million above expenditures for the fiscal year. So there may be some questions on that. I'll do my best to answer.
Yes, given the that we held and didn't raise our real estate taxes, do you anticipate that we would receive a similar amount during this current budget year?
I think that's a fair assessment to make. Are there any other questions? Now, Chairman Lyons, I do need to mention, we did increase when we were looking at developing the 22 budget, we did project an increase in real estate. So it wouldn't be exactly the same number.
Right, but we didn't project the 900,000.
That's correct. Yes, sir. Okay, if there's no other questions on the line chart, then we'll transition to the appropriation resolution. And so you can see there's both the general fund, the construction project fund, and the capital purchases fund. So starting with the general fund, there's 4 items. The first one is professional services at $15,255. And this will cover a recent VACORP invoice for legal services that were provided to the county. This is connected to a zoning enforcement case. And so this would be sourced from unassigned reserves in the general fund. The next one is the final invoice or two that's anticipated on the Route 60 project. You may recall that last March, you all had appropriated $1.283 million to do projects or components of the project that were not financed. And so they've got 1 or 2 invoices that are like soft cost associated with engineering that they anticipate to pay this year. So that's $2,500. The next one is my data entry error in the FY22 budget. And so the courthouse bond refunding interest payment should have totaled $162,355. And I accidentally put in $16,355. So I missed the 2 in the number. So the delta there is $146,000. So that would be funded from unassigned reserves. And then the last one is linked to last fiscal year, the board appropriated $62,192 to support Goshen in their efforts on blighted properties, support for a community center, and improvements to their water system. And so they didn't have any expenditures last year, so I'm just carrying it over. We're asking to carry that over into FY '22. The next set of funds, those are all carryover funds. So I don't know if you want me to go into any additional detail, but basically those are projects that are continuing on into FY '22. So if you don't have any questions on the remaining portion of the appropriation resolution, I've reviewed the bills. There were 440. I've got some notes if there's any questions. Otherwise, the recommendation is to approve the appropriation resolution and pay the bills.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Bolster? Hearing none, you've heard his recommendation. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you, Mr. Bolster.
Thank you, sir.
Further discussion on the cigarette tax.
Okay, just a very brief lead in on this. At your last meeting on June 26th, the board tabled the discussion on implementation, or set over the discussion. I'm learning. Vicky corrects me from time to time. Set over the discussion on implementation of a cigarette tax until this meeting on July 26th. Since that time, there have been no changes in the surrounding localities that I have to report to you. And to recap, the board's has been this spring considering a 30-cent per tax or per pack tax. And the previously advertised ordinance is in your package with only the dates revised. And just like I say, that as reported last month, Buena Vista council voted not to implement the tax. And Lexington was considering a 30-cent tax, but delayed the decision, waiting for the county to make a decision. So I've really got nothing else to report. Nothing's really changed with the other localities at this time.
Any comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I still believe it's something we should do, but without Mr. Day here this evening, I'm thinking I'd want to set it over again till we have the full board participation, since it's, a new issue to the board. But I don't know. That's a question for Ms. Huffman, I guess, can we set that over again, Ms. Huffman? I know there's a time limit of some sort, but I can't remember exactly what that is.
Actually, that's part of the problem, is that there is no specific time limit on, I think it's, except that it's 12 months from advertisement, which is usually considered a long time out from the time of the public hearing. So it's really a matter of what's reasonable and what the board feels in its judgment is an appropriate amount of time. I have suggested that 90 days would be a good rule of thumb to re-advertise if you decided to consider adopting it after that time. But there's no hard and fast rule.
You've heard Mr. Lewis's recommendation. Is there any comments? Are we ready to proceed, or would you prefer to wait for Mr. Day to return?
I agree that we should wait. Mr. Day.
Okay, if we could add this to our agenda at the next meeting, please.
When was the public hearing?
April 26th, I believe.
So technically, we're kind of at the 90-day window.
Pretty close as of today. 2 weeks, is probably fine.
I was only going to ask that instead of our first meeting in August, could it be our second meeting? Is that additional 30 days? Is that too much?
I think it's a question of what you all think and what you're hearing, or whether you're concerned that it is going too far out from when the public notice was given.
It's covered in the paper every time.
I see.
Every time we delay. So I feel that it is in the paper. It is being covered. So
I was just thinking, I mean, my district being a little different in that the neighboring county is not acting on this at this time. So I don't feel comfortable acting on it until they do, because I don't want to put the retailers in my district at a disadvantage. And I was just thinking, not that anything would happen with an additional 2 weeks, but I guess anything's possible. Is the reason I was asking.
My sense on that jurisdiction that nothing will happen this year. And one other point is that the effective date has been set at in the proposed ordinance at January 1, 2022. The plan being for a 6-month period. So at this point, to get it up and running, if it's adopted. So at this point, if it's set out, it might be worthwhile to consider moving the effective date out as well.
And Commissioner and Treasurer not here, but I think they would probably agree to that. I think the minimum to prepare for this and do the procurement of stamps, I think 6 months is a good minimum to look at.
Okay, so we'll move it to the second meeting in August, and hopefully everyone will be here prepared to vote. Appointment of professional assessor for the 2023 general assessment.
Okay, discussed this just a little bit ago about the reassessment getting started today, some field work today. So in May, the board retained Wingate Appraisal Service to conduct the county's upcoming reassessment, and per state code, which included a copy that Ms. Huffman provided to me in the board report, the board must officially appoint a professional assessor. Via the letter in your package, Don Thomas, President and COO of Wingate Appraisal Service, has requested the county appoint Miles F.P. Willett Jr. to this role. We know Miles as Skip. He's worked in the past couple of reassessments for the county. He's a longtime employee of Wingate, significant experience in this county. And he's also a county resident. So the request is for the board to officially appoint Mr. Willett as the county's assessor for the upcoming assessment.
Okay, you've heard Mr. Suter's recommendation. Are there any questions? If not, do we have a motion to approve Mr. Willett?
So moved.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Ms. Ayers,
yes,
and the chair votes yes. Let's move on and get the authorization to issue an RFP for the elevator that's been out for a long time.
Right, so it's been out since late last fall. We had an issue with the elevator generator, the motor. And so you can see in the board docs for the agenda report. So we contacted the contractor.
But Steve, just the agenda item is not uploading. That's in board docs, so you're referring to it, and at least on mine, it won't pull.
Oh, you know what's going on? I think, Chris, are we still having problems with the internet here? Are you able to get on?
No, but it won't.
Load up, you're right. I was looking at paper copy.
I got mine. It uploaded. I just wonder if our constituents can upload it at the same time. We can
I
give
think
him a
it's-
hard copy. It just,
I think it's local to
okay.
our internal network.
Perhaps I have a hard copy.
So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and read through the agenda report so that way folks can see it or hear it. So late last fall, the elevator generator, the motor in the county admin building failed. We contacted the maintenance contractor, that's Otis, which sent out technicians to evaluate. Initially, we received an estimate to make the repair. The repair was not budgeted and was well outside a normal expenditure for which we would ask the board for appropriation. It included a rebuilt motor. After months of back and forth, staff had finalized a contract for the repairs. At that time, Otis recommended a different direction with purchase and replacement of new equipment due to the age of the equipment and difficulty in obtaining parts for repairs and maintenance. We asked Otis to assess the elevator and determine a scope of service so that we could obtain competitive bids for replacement with new equipment. That process took some time, and when we received a scope of service, the estimated cost was 3.5 times more than the original repair estimate. This gave us pause in that not having a professional engineer on staff, we were unable to expertly assess the level of repair that is truly required, given the disparity between the first and second estimates. After internal discussion, staff has determined that the best course of action at this point is to solicit proposals for the repair. We would then assess the proposals, a proposal which best suits our needs, which would include expedited repair. We are cognizant of the fact that the elevator has been out of service for far too long as it is. So listed below in the agenda report is the scope of services, certainly with its knowledge of the elevator under the existing service contract, Otis would be eligible to provide a proposal. Now, at this point, I don't know if you want me to go through the scope of service or the criteria for evaluating the proposals. I was thinking not. So at this point,
Thank you.
staff believes this work falls under non-professional services. Virginia Code Section 2.2-4303.C states that upon a determination made in advance by the public body and set forth in writing that competitive sealed bidding is either not practicable or not fiscally advantageous to the public, goods, services, or insurance may be procured by competitive negotiation. The writing shall document the basis for this determination. So staff feels that in order to ensure that we gain the best service for the county and to meet the intent of the scope of services, we will be better served by issuing a request for proposals rather than a request for bids, sometimes referred to as an invitation for bid. This recommendation is based on the fact that the county would be best served by soliciting the most technically qualified provider of services rather than the lowest bidder. In addition, an experienced proposer may offer recommendations that may prove beneficial and cost-effective to the county. So should the board agree with staff, appropriate procurement language will be added to the attached scope of service prior to the issuance of an RFP. So with that, staff is available to answer any questions, but our request is to authorize the issuance of an RFP, a request for proposals, for the services outlined in the scope of services, finding that an invitation for bid is neither practicable nor physically advantageous to the public for the reasons set forth earlier in the agenda.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Bowles? You've heard his request. We have a motion to approve his request to put out an RFP.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Ms. Ayers,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
It's 6 o'clock, so we will move on to our public hearings. First one being Carrie Height. So we'll get Chris to.
Here. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen, do a brief presentation before I turn it over to Mr. Business Height. All right, the first public hearing we have is for Carrie Height application for a special exception, pet grooming. It's a kennel in the agricultural and general use districts. The property is located and the Height property is located and surrounded by the agricultural and general use districts. That's the A2 zoning district and is identified as tax map number 40-A-25A. Carrie Height has made an application for a special exception permit to operate a dog grooming business. The property is owned by Carrie and Bradley Height and consists of 1 acre per tax record. The property is located at 32 Wet Bear Lane, Fairfield, Virginia, and again is in the A2 zoning district. Per section 603.03-5 of the County of Rockbridge Land Development Regulations, commercial kennels are a use by special exception. Thought it'd be beneficial to review the definition of a commercial or as a kennel as defined in 302.116 of the regulations. A kennel is defined as any location where the raising, grooming, caring for, or boarding of dogs, cats, or other small animals for commercial purposes is carried on. On July 14th, 2021, the Planning Commission held its public hearing and has recommended approval of the special exception application with the following conditions. Number 1, the business shall be limited to grooming of dogs and or cats. Number 2, no overnight boarding, breeding, or training permitted. Number 3, no more than a total of 3 dogs and or cats allowed on the property at one time for grooming. And number 4, the hours of operation for the grooming services shall be limited to Monday through Saturday from 9 a.m. through 5 p.m. With that, I'd like to turn this portion of the presentation over to Mr. and Mrs. Height to review any additional details or answer any questions. I'm going to stop sharing and turn the floor over.
I have nothing to add. Anyone has any questions?
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. and Mrs. Height? All right, hearing none, then thank you for coming, and we will open the public comment for the public hearing. Chris, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, sir. No one signed up to speak.
Anyone electronically?
No one's got their hand raised.
Okay, then we will close the public hearing. Any further discussion by the board?
It doesn't appear the property is in close proximity to neighbors, but have you contacted your neighbors about this? Or are they aware of it?
One neighbor we have, yes. Nelson Krause, one, he doesn't care. The other property that joins us is more of a recreational hunting property. No one lives on the property. I think they live in Stanton. And I have not spoken to them. I haven't seen them come in once in a while on the weekend. Hunting season, that's the only time.
No, when kennels come up, you know, sometimes we hear from disgruntled citizens about barking and stuff. I just wanted to know if you'd reached out to your neighbors, and you have, so I appreciate that.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none, do we have a motion?
Move to approve as presented.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second?
And a second. Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Ms. Ayers,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
and the chair votes yes. Congratulations, it's approved.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Slagle, I guess you're up again.
Yes, sir. The next, bear with me, I'm going to share my screen again. All right, the next public hearing we have on the agenda is for Holocene Clean Energy application for a special exception permit to modify the fencing and landscaping plan of an approved special exception permit condition. The property area zoning map is displayed on the screen. The property is located in and surrounded by the agricultural and general use zoning district. That's the A2 zoning district, and is identified as tax map number 36-A-65. The property is owned by Kenneth and Susan Moeller and consists of 92.28 acres per tax records. The special exception permit for the 2.5 megawatt AC solar project was approved by the Board of Supervisors on January 27th, 2020. The purpose of this application is to modify the landscaping plan and the fencing plan. Under review is the proposed modification to the fencing plan and landscaping plan. The modification to the landscaping plan is at the request of the property owners, Brownlee. The landscaping plan has been modified to remove a strip of plantings on the Brownlee property. The Brownlee property is located at 130 Walkers Creek Road, Rockbridge, Bath, Virginia, and is further identified as tax map number 36-A-65B. When the special exception plan was approved, the plan including a strip of plantings, the plan included a strip of plantings on the Brownlee properties. In order to ensure that the plantings can be planted and maintained for the life of the project, the developer has required a landscaping easement on the Brownlee property. Mr. Brownlee is reluctant to have that encumbrance on the property. His concerns included the marketability of the property and the future landowner's wishes for that section of the property. According to the developer and Mr. Brownlee, the plantings will be implemented as shown on the previously approved plan, but would not be associated with the special exception permit, meaning that Mr. and Mrs. Brownlee would allow for the plantings to be implemented, and the future landowner could keep the plantings or remove them if they desire to utilize the portion of that property for another use. As shown on the plan, all other landscaping is on the Moeller property, and the developer has a formal landscaping agreement with the Moellers. Per the fencing modification, the previously approved plan included a 6-foot chain link fence with barbed wire and green vinyl slats. The 2020 special exception process, during the 2020 special exception process, the discussion with the Planning Commission included that the slats would be removed as part of the conditions of the special exception permit. However, the green slats were not removed from the plan. So per the plan, they're still required. In addition to that modification, according with the slats, the developer has requested the change from the type of fencing from previously approved 6-foot chain link fence with barbed wire on top to a 6-foot fixed knot fence with barbed wire. So here, if you could, this is a picture that the applicant on the left-hand side, this is a picture of the proposed 6-foot fixed knot fence. And then the two on the right-hand side on the top here, if you can follow my cursor, of course, we're all very familiar with both of them, I should say. The top one is examples of chain links, both zoomed out and zoomed in. And the bottom one is an example of the fixed knot or woven wire fence, zoomed out, zoomed in. The Planning Commission recommended that the fencing plans included a 6-foot chain link fence with barbed wire versus the proposed modification for a 6-foot fixed knot fence with barbed wire. The primary concern with the fixed knot fence at the Planning Commission was security. On July 14th, 2021, the Planning Commission held its public hearing and has recommended approval of the special exception permit with the following conditions. Number one, substantial compliance with the site plan and landscaping plan prepared by Perkins and Orson PLC, dated October 25th, 2019, with revised dates of December 2nd, 2019, January 15th, 2020, January 28th, 2020, June 18th, 2021, and July 19th, 2021, on file in the office of the clerk of the Board of Supervisors. Number two, the maximum height of the tilt for the solar array shall be 15 feet. Number three, landscaping shall be maintained in healthy condition for the life of the project. Number four, acceptance of a decommissioning agreement incorporating a decommissioning plan dated August 26, 2019, in lieu of a bond, but which shall be reevaluated every 5 years. The plan has been updated as shown in your package. The plan has been updated to include a chain link fence with a revision date of July 19th, 2021, and that date has been added to the plan. Staff has included pictures in the package and in this presentation for the fixed knot fence for the board's consideration. If the board prefers the fixed knot fence, the last revision date of July 19th, 2021 would be removed from the ordinance and the condition. This would just revert it back to the requested changes of a fixed knot fence versus the chain link. With that, I'd like to turn this portion of the presentation over to Mr. Orson with Perkins and Orson and Mr. Suttle with EDF Renewable Energy. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
I'll be short with Mr. Bowler to speak to it, but I try not to be surprised at these meetings, but I was surprised when planning commission said that they, well, the picture's not up, that they wanted a chain link fence instead of a fixed knot fence. And it shocked me, and it shocked Mr. Moeller, and we didn't see it coming. So we strongly urge you to go with what I think most of the neighbors want, which would be the woven wire fence.
You mean because for visual?
Yeah, yeah. It's,
Does it have something to do with property values? What I understood from the Dominion project was that that would change the property values and we would actually make more on taxes, but that it adds to the property value to have the chain link and not the other.
I know of nothing like that. The chain link costs more, but
Right.
but I don't think it affects the property values other than seeing a chain link fence. Which, if it was necessary for security, I'm not saying that it would be a reason to deny the project if you needed a chain link fence, but we don't need a chain link fence. We just don't.
Well, what do we protect? I mean, what are we afraid of? I'm
I don't know. But I don't know what
Something
planning commission
that
was
I don't
afraid
know.
of. We're not afraid of anything.
Yeah, it's an honest answer. Question. I just don't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't get it.
So the neighbors are absolutely in favor of the other.
The property owner is, the applicant is, the engineer is, staff is,
The neighbors.
planning commission. It was 3-2. We went from 5-0 to 3-2 because two people didn't want a chain link fence.
Mhm.
It's a 6-foot woven wire.
Yes,
That's kind
plus
of
barbed
that's kind of
wire.
unusual too, isn't it?
It's a little unusual, but the electrical code requires 7 feet total.
Okay. All right, so that's just code.
Can't get out of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. And my name is Jeff Suttle. I'm here representing EDF Renewables. We're partnered with Bark Electric and Holocene Clean Energy on this project. My company, EDF Renewables, is the one that's going to be constructing the project, commissioning, operating and maintaining the project. So I'm just here to answer any, if there are any questions on specifics about the fence or the easement, I'm happy to chime in. But otherwise, I defer to Russ and Mr. Muller.
So are you concerned with security that we need a chain link fence or?
Yeah, so National Electric Code requires a 7-foot fence.
Right, but
So
as
you
far
can-
as the material it's made out of, is there a security?
You
risk
can
to-
accomplish that with 6 feet of chain link and a foot of barbed wire, or 6 feet of woven wire and a foot of barbed wire. Either one works. My company, EDF Renewables, has used both. The woven wire tends to be preferable, as we've actually seen, exactly as we've counted here, by the neighbors. And in this case, we discussed it with county staff. So we can do either, and we're willing to do either. But based on discussions with the county staff and with the landowner and the neighbor, Mr. Brownlee, we requested the change to woven wire because it just looks less institutional, right?
Right,
It's just about optics.
And it's only either one is only gonna keep the honest people out.
That's you got wire cutters. It doesn't matter
Exactly.
if you got chain link or if somebody's
Right.
determined, there will be signage indicating. This is a power generation facility, right? So there will be signage indicating, so for safety, and then you'll have the fence with the barbed wire, and it'll be gated. It's intended to keep people out, but if somebody's determined, only so much you can do.
Any other
Thank you.
questions?
No.
Happy to answer anything additional that comes up.
Okay, thank
Appreciate
you.
your time.
At this time, we'll open the public hearing.
Mr. Suttle was the first signed up, and next is Mr. Kimball.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman,
Good evening.
members of the board. I'm Ken Mower from the Walker's Creek District. And as was stated, we were quite shocked at the planning commission meeting. The neighbors, being mostly farmers and Reverend Brownlee, who grew up on a farm, would rather not have the prison fence if we could get by without it. So with that thought, the fixed knot, new type of woven wire fence, again, is still 7 foot high. So it certainly will keep the deer out, hopefully the bear out. As you stated, years ago over at Arnold's Valley, I had the privilege of helping the sheriff's office watch the Dominion Power's copper that was being stolen at night. But the fact the bolt cutters was cutting the fence every other night, it didn't matter how tall a fence or how good a fence it was. So again, the neighbors would much like to have an agriculture fence possible. Also hadn't been stated, but this fence will be up. And then out from that will be another 5-strand barbed wire fence that will be protecting the trees from my cows eating them. So it's actually going to be a double fence, not that it matters, but anyway, again, I would ask the board support an agriculture fence, especially in our area.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
No one else has signed up to speak.
Anyone electronically? All right, at this time, we'll close the public hearing. Comments from the board?
Right. Maybe, Chris, what, can you give us the thoughts of the planning commission in terms of why they?
I think the primary concern, well, I don't think that the primary concern expressed was security and vandalism.
Okay.
As far as the ease to climb a woven wire versus the ease to climb a chain link. Granted, they both have a strand or so of barbed wire on top.
I run a pool with a 6-foot chain link fence and it does not keep kids from coming in. So I think I would have to defer to whatever the neighbors. Now, I would assume that both of these fences, they're maintained by the company regardless of fence, correct?
That,
Maintained for the duration of the project.
yes, that it would be expected to be maintained. Yes, ma'am.
Right. Okay.
So the request didn't actually come from the applicant, it came from the neighbors.
The request, the application came from the applicant, and that application included the 6-foot woven wire or fixed knot fence. Now, that is on the fencing side. Now, the landscaping came directly from the Brownlee property owners. So it's sort of twofold, process of what we're dealing with, landscaping and fencing.
But it's the neighbors that want the woven fence.
According to the testimony we've heard this evening, yes. Now, I don't think we've had multiple conversations with Mr. Brownlee on the landscaping being removed and how to do that or how they could achieve that. But I do not think that, if I recall correctly, that conversation did not include any fencing. My direct conversation with Mr. Brownlee.
Well, I think we go to all this effort to require the landscaping to try to shield the project or make it more appeasing. Then why would we put a chain link fence out in a rural area to make it stick out like a sore thumb? I personally would hope that we would go with the woven wire. I think it's very appropriate for the area. I don't think it's going to create any more security problems than if you had a chain link fence. Truth be told, they'll probably just cut the lock on the gate. So it really doesn't make a difference, but I think it would, if we can please the neighbors and make it more aesthetically pleasing to the people that are traveling, I would lean towards the woven knot fence. Any other comments?
I agree with you, Chairman Lyons. Are we still in the public hearing or have we closed that?
We've closed the public hearing and we're board discussion. Are you participating or recusing yourself?
I have no, I I don't think I have a reason to recuse myself, so I'm
Well,
participating.
isn't this, I was thinking this project he mentioned was in partnership with Bark. I don't want to put you in a bad situation. I'm happy to hear your comments.
But so Ms. Huffman do you, I don't believe, I believe I participated before and we discussed it, but
I checked and I did not find where there had been an abstention previously. In terms of being a neighboring property owner, you're one of multiple property owners and neighboring property owners who would potentially be impacted. And I don't think the company's pre-existing contract with BARC would be implicated in this decision. You certainly could abstain, but for what it's worth, with my opinion, you're not required to.
All right, Mr. Lewis, speak away then.
and furthermore, I'm not actually, I don't personally own any property, neighbor. My, family does, but not immediate family. So I wouldn't think that would disqualify me either. But no, I would move that we, with apologies to my friends on the planning commission, move that we approve the project with the knotted wire.
Okay, is there anything else we need to include in the motion, Chris?
No, sir, that would just be striking the last, excuse me, that would just include the board making the motion, striking the last revision date of July 19th, 2021 would be removed from the ordinance and conditions. And that would just revert it back to the originally submitted landscaping and fencing land plan of the fixed.
And I believe that was Mr. Lewis's motion. Correct, Mr. Lewis?
Yes, sir.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Ms. Ayers,
Yes,
and the chair votes yes. It's approved with the woven wire fence.
Thank you.
Buffalo Creek Foundation.
Yes, and Mr. Suter, could you promote? Thank you, sir. Mr. Taylor, you should be promoted to panelist. All right. Bear with me here. I'm going to do a very brief PowerPoint presentation. And before I get started with my presentation, Mr. Taylor, can you hear us? And you may be muted.
How's that? Better?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. I'm going to do a brief presentation, then turn the floor over to you.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you. The next item agenda we have is for the Buffalo Creek Foundation application for a special exception permit for a private school in the agricultural transitional, that's the AT zoning district. The property is located in and surrounded by the agricultural transitional zoning district. That would be the pink on this map. The white on the map to the south is the agricultural and general use districts. That's an A2. And then the gray on the map to the north is the industrial zoning district. That would be the general industrial zoning district. The BJB properties is outlined in orange and identified as tax map number 40-1-1. Buffalo Creek Foundation has made an application for a special exception permit to operate a private school on 34.86 acre portion of their overall tract. And again, it's located in the AT zoning district per section 603B 0.03-17 of the County of Rockbridge Land Development Regulations. Private schools are used by special exception in the AT zoning district. The property is located at 2440 Rafine Road, Rafine, Virginia, and currently owned by BJB Properties. Phase 1 includes 2 classrooms, buildings for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade with a total of 36 students While a portion of the property is located within the 100-year flood hazard overlay, the classrooms will be located outside of the 100-year flood zone. Phase 2 would include 2 additional classrooms for high school students. The enclosed schematic plan is for Phase 1. The current special exception permit is for Phase 1. As far as the proposed conditions, on July 14th, 2021, the Rockbridge County Planning Commission held its public hearing and has recommended approval of special exception permit with the application with the following conditions. Excuse me. Number 1, substantial compliance with the schematic site plan, Buffalo Creek Foundation, dated June 10th, 2021, on file in the clerk office of the clerk of the Board of Supervisors. Number 2, all new structures to be located out of the 100-year flood hazard zone. Number 3, all new development shall be serviced by public water and public sewer. Number 4, total number of students not to exceed 36. Number 5, the school will be limited to 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. Number 6, the existing private bridge will be closed and gated during all school operations. Number 7, the plan to be implemented within 2 years of date of approval. And number 8, contingent upon approval contingent upon VDOT, Health Department, Building Department, and Department of Educational approvals. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Lee Taylor that is joining us via Zoom.
Thank you, Chris.
All right. Well, yes, sir. We can hear you well.
All right. May it please the board, Mr. Chairman. First off, I'd like to apologize. I would very much like to be there to share with you in person, but I'm sorry to say that my wife was diagnosed with COVID yesterday. So I'm being very careful what I share with anyone. So what I would like to do is just briefly review the project with you and then answer any questions that you have. Chris did a great job of summarizing our application. Many of you are familiar with Buffalo Creek Boys School. It was started 5 years ago for the purpose of teaching boys the way they learn best and to instill virtue into their character and to challenge them physically, spiritually, and academically. The school was begun on Gray Fox Farm, our family farm out toward Collierstown, through a special exception permit that we went through this process about 5 years ago. We have had tremendous success with the students, and last year reached the limit of our enrollment there at the Collierstown, the Buffalo Creek location. After a 3-year search for a piece of property suitable for the school, primarily a piece that's got enough flat ground on it to put a couple of ball fields, we finally came upon this piece of property, a beautiful historical farm located between Steels Fort Road and I-81 on the north end of the county. It's perfectly suited for the type of school that Buffalo Creek represents, and I think the school is a very good fit for the property. The 1755, I believe, there's an old stone house, a limestone house located on the property that is in really excellent condition for a historical restoration. There is a tremendous spring on the property. The water resources is wonderful. We've got some folks interested in helping us start a fisheries program to augment our math and science programs. And it's just a really a great location for what we do with the outdoors and agricultural hands-on part of our education. The property has a number of structures located on it. There are about 6 or 7 structures. 3 of them are really not able to be renovated. They're going to have to be raised. The schematic plan you see there shows the first structures. We plan to put in 3 structures, 2 classrooms, and an administrative structure. And And at this point, we are doing only middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. But at the time that we actually get over there to the Rafine property, if this permit process goes forward, we would very possibly also include either 5th or 9th graders, or even both. So as I get to the end of my presentation, I would like to address, I think it's condition 5 of the recommendation. I would like to ask the board to add 5th and 9th grade to that. So it would be actually 5th through 9th grade rather than 6, 7, and 8. The one thing that we're still working on, although I think we've got it mostly resolved, is the traffic pattern for the school. It is located, it's fronts on Steels Fort Road, and then the side road, Moore's Trail, actually goes up the southern end of the property. And we've been working with Alvin Trout to figure out the best way to route the traffic for the school. The existing entrance on Steels Fort Road is in a curve, and we were not able to get sufficient sight distance there for the commercial entrance. But we have gotten a location up on Moore's Trail, which is a gravel road that runs off of Steels Fort, and I think is an excellent location for the traffic, as well as the way the land lies. And the way that we anticipate using the property, that's really the most suitable entrance for our use of the property. One other, I guess, in working with Mr. Trout, one of the things he has recommended is that the school actually help foot the bill for one of the improvements to that road. There's plenty of right away there, but Mr. Trout indicated that he would like to have a little bit more gravel added to the surface of that road to make it passable with 2 lanes of traffic. Right now, it's just really, it's a wider than a single track road, but but we need a little bit more surface to have 2-way traffic comfortably. The only other thing I'd like to address is there's a condition that the planning condition added, number 6, I believe it is, that one of the members of the planning commission felt like the existing entrance there on Steels Fort Road was a dangerous entrance, and that it should be closed during all school activities. After the meeting, I became a little concerned about that, because the house that's there, it is a residential structure, and we aren't sure what that's going to be used for. And that is the primary agricultural entrance as well. So I would ask the board to consider leaving that to Mr. Trout and VDOT to make a decision on the best way to handle that. He may decide that it needs to be closed or limited, but rather than being done by special exception permit, I would ask that just be left to the Department of Transportation. Any questions that any one of you might have?
Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
At this time, we will open the public hearing. Has anyone signed up to speak, Chris?
There's no one signed up to speak. We did receive some email correspondence during the planning commission. There were 2 email correspondences, and one was directed directly to the members of the planning commission, and the second one was to the planning commission and the Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors. So if the chair feels it's appropriate, I'd like to read the
one
comment.
that's addressed to the supervisors.
Yes, sir.
please.
Yes. This is from Dorothy and Gary Gerhart. It's again addressed to the Rockbridge County Planning Commission and the Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors. It states, my husband and I live at 162 Steels Fort Road, which is directly across the street, across from 31 Steels Fort Loop, the property being discussed. My siblings and I also owned the named property prior to selling it to BJB Properties LLC in 2019. Having inherited from our parents upon their passing, my husband and I have lived at our present address since 1975. building on part of the original Steels Fort property. I give you this information to emphasize our knowledge of the area. My vision for the property of my childhood home would not have included it to be used for a private school facility since we will be living right across the road. However, we recently talked with Mr. and Mrs. Taylor about their plans and have a somewhat better feeling about it at this time. We do, however, have great concern about the increase of traffic that it will bring to our area on an already very busy road. We also understand that there is a plan for Mr. Bender, owner of Blue Ridge Christian Homes Beulah Land Campus, to build a housing development in our area adjacent to our property, which will result in even more traffic on Steels Fort Road. With more traffic comes the greater possibility of injury or death due to accidents because of excessive speed that is allowed to continue without law enforcement. We witnessed the speeding every day that includes both local traffic and in and out traffic occurring from the overflow of traffic from I-81. Steels Fort Road is a crossroad from US 11 to 81 in Rafine and heavily traveled with everything from farm tractors to big logging trucks and 18-wheelers, etc. We ask that some enforcement of the posted speed be done in order to discourage speeding, especially on the dangerous curve in front of our residents. Thank you for this consideration. Again, Dorothy and Gary Gerhardt.
Thank you, Chris. Any other comments or communication? And at this time, we will close the public hearing. Discussion among the board.
So the school would be moving from Collierstown to Reagan. That's the plan.
That is correct.
And I'm glad to address any questions that any of you might have.
Chris, do you have any input on the recommendations of Mr. Taylor as far as the changes?
I do. We talked about both of these especially number 5. We definitely addressed those, conversation with Mr. and Mrs. Taylor present, that'd be limited to 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. With that being said, Lee did give me a heads up on his comments on both of those, this morning. I have not had the opportunity to reach out to the district supervisor or obviously any individual board supervisors members. But as it currently stands, the school will be limited to 6th, 7th, and 8th graders was a recommendation that the planning commission had. Mr. Taylor, of course, is asked to add 5th and or 9th or 5th and 9th?
And or 9th, and we're just not sure. By the time we get over there, we would like to have that flexibility. We certainly don't intend to have any more than the 36 students that was included in the conditions, but we just feel like it would give us a little bit of flexibility to figure out how to best serve the community in education.
And I will say, Mr. Taylor touched on my very next question of will that exceed the number of students? So it will not. As far as the existing private bridge will be the condition, Mr. Taylor was correct. It's condition number 6. The existing private bridge will be closed and gated during all school operations. And that was also discussed that they were unable to obtain a commercial entrance permit on, it's actually 2 entrances in that curve. And I don't know if historically that was an enter and exit. It is around, as Mr. Taylor said, it is around a large turn, if you will. And so I don't know if historical growth patterns with the farm and the Steels Fort Manor, if that was one entrance or exit. But and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Taylor, but Mr. Trout looked at both of those for entrances and exits, and neither one of them were able to achieve the sight distance required for a commercial, either low volume or moderate volume commercial. So both of those are considered private entrances, I believe. With that being said, there is a bridge that goes over a stream that accesses right before the existing manor house itself. With that being said, VDOT very rarely requires entrances to be closed. They do require entrances to be modified, and they require entrances to be moved. But I can tell you numerous examples where the original entrance is not required to be physically closed. And With that being said, I will note that the entrance on Morris Trail Road, as shown on the exact site plan, will go as planned now, will have access to the house itself. And so it was a safety concern at the Planning Commission, and they felt it would be beneficial to prohibit the use of that bridge during school operations. And that's why they chose to have a requirement of that bridge being gated, closed and gated during school operations, obviously to not reduce, but to eliminate parents, potentially drivers, to exit or enter out of that non-approved entrance.
Will the entrance that's being suggested have signage, so that the parents know where to go and how to enter and exit?
Yes, as shown on the schematic site plan, the entrance off of Morris Trail Road does have a sign.
And I'm sure
Yes, and we would,
I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor.
I'm sorry.
I'm assuming that in your literature, brochures, whatever for the school, you would have entrance and exits marked.
absolutely. And we would also control traffic internally. We would, we're going to be very particular about the way traffic is routed, just for the safety of the students, the safety of pedestrians. It's going to be a largely a walking campus rather than a driving campus. So we would certainly limit outside traffic from the areas of the campus that we did not want them to go, and certainly would not want anyone to use that entrance with students, because I don't think it's as Mr. Trout had said, it's just not a good location for a commercial entrance.
And your request was to leave that decision up to VDOT, correct? If they decide that it needs to be closed, so be it.
Exactly. And we do plan to restore the house. We may have a staff member living in the house. The existing house is quite a long ways from Moores Trail Road. And we would just ask that the traffic be, that the people that are living in the house, or the entire northern end of the property, which is going to be our agricultural area, that those areas be available to have access from Steele's Fort Road by the historical entrance, unless VDOT decides that that's just not suitable.
Well, I mean, using the gate, those people could open and close the gate. It doesn't mean it has to be closed completely.
No, you're right. But it's just it's really an inconvenience. And I think the concern was that people would drive out that way. They would come in on the Morris Trail Road and then exit there, and that's simply not the case, because the traffic will be routed internally and would not allow folks to go out that way. So it would be an entrance and an exit only for the agricultural area or the residents.
Would that hold true if the residence was turned into we have talked about it being a office facility for the school. That would still, what we're hearing is that would be prohibited to use the entrance, the Steele's Fort.
Yeah, anybody coming or going, absolutely. We would not plan to use that for any academic or school purpose. I don't see that building becoming we've looked into the zoning or the building code, and I think it's just going to be prohibitive to try to put that building in shape to be used for school purposes.
My last question is, have you had any contact with Supervisor Day since it's in his area?
I have yet. The only contact I've had with Supervisor Day was at the the evening that the newspaper article was published. I did, as always, I try to give the supervisors a heads up on upcoming planning commission. I usually try to do that prior to it being in the newspaper, but this particular chance I did not have the opportunity. But I did have a very brief discussion on them Wednesday evening, 3 weeks ago to today.
Was he supportive?
Really, we didn't go into level of detail as far as him being a supporter of the application or not. It was more just a proactive phone call saying, hey, this is 2 items coming up for in your district on this particular agenda. Thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, I'm ready to hear a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve with the changes that are being requested by the applicant.
All right, we have a motion to approve with the changes requested. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second. Any further discussion?
Chris, do you need any clarification?
No,
on that?
sir. It would just be to add on number 5, it would be school will be limited to 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th graders or grades. And then we're completely striking number 6, correct?
I would say as the applicant presented it, that decision to be left up to VDOT.
We have that on there because of number 8 has approval contingent on VDOT, Health Department, Building Department, and Department of Educational approval. So that's covered.
And we have the maximum number of students at 36.
The maximum number of students is number 4. The total number of students not to exceed 36. Yes, sir.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
You're on mute.
Aye.
And the chair votes yes. It's approved.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris?
All right, the next public hearing we have is Siegfried Holdings LLC, application for a special exception permit, venue in the agricultural uses A2 zoning district. The property is located and surrounded by the general agricultural zoning district. A2 is further identified as tax map number 27-1-1B. Karen and John Siegfried Holdings LLC has made an application for a special exception permit operate a special events venue on the Wades Mill property. The property is owned by Siegfried Holdings LLC, is located 55 Kennedy Wades Mill Loop, Rafine, Virginia. Per section 603.03-24 of the County of Rockbridge Land Development Regulations, special events are a use by special exception. On the July 14th, 2021, the Planning Commission held its public hearing as recommended approval of the special exception permit application with the following conditions. Number 1, substantial compliance with the concept prepared by the applicant. Number 2, events will be limited to a maximum of 200 attendees. Number 3, all site activities will be concluded by 11 p.m. Number 4, adequate off-street parking facilities with traffic controls will be provided. No parking along Kennedy Wades Mill Loop, Route 618, nor Rafine Road, Route 606. Number 5, alcoholic beverages will not be self-served. Number 6, all trash will be taken directly to the landfill and not county collection centers or county green boxes. Number 7, any amplified music must be within enclosed structure and concluded by 11 p.m. Number 8, lighting shall be in compliance with 1303 of the County of Rockbridge Land Development Regulations. Number 9, no aerial fireworks shall be permitted. No outdoor fires shall be permitted by attendees. Number 10, approval contingent upon building department, county building department, VDOT, and health department approvals. With that, I'd like to turn this portion over, this portion of the presentation over to Miss Karen Siegfried to review the application and answer any questions that the supervisors may have.
Mr. Chairman and the board, thank you for having us. My husband and I purchased Wades Mill in the summer of 2016 and thought we were buying a small business. And soon after we arrived, we realized that we had purchased a a property that had had a very important role in the community, a long, tradition and historical role in the community, both practical and emotional for many people. And with that, we realized we'd become caretakers of this historic tradition. So over the years, we have invested a lot of effort and energy in preserving and enhancing the property to make it accessible to the community and to visitors to the county. And in doing that, we increasingly have had interest in people wanting to have events at the property. And apparently, historically, it was an events venue, if you will. Charlie Wade, who was the last Wade Miller, visited us several weeks ago with a cousin of his who had grown up on the property in the 60s and 70s. And she had said that in the summertime, almost every weekend on Saturdays and Sundays, there were weddings at the mill, and all of the Wade kids stood out on the mill platform and watched the weddings take place in front of the mill. So I think there is a tradition of having events at the mill that the community is used to. So we feel we're now at a point after almost 5 years of owning the property and investing in improving the facilities, the gardens, the landscape, that the property is in a condition now where it would be appropriate to make it available for people to hold events there. And so that's the purpose of our application now.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you. At this time, we'll open the public hearing.
No one has signed up to speak.
Okay, anybody electronically or
Not unless.
emails, Chris? And
Speak.
nobody? Okay, we will close the public hearing and discussion by board members. Hearing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second?
And a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Lewis,
Aye.
Ms. Ayers,
Aye.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. It stands approved. Thank you. We will quickly back ourselves up for appointments. We have received an application for the EDA vacancy. Mr. Pat Patterson from Walker's Creek. Does anyone have anything to say about Mr. Patterson's application, or do we have a motion to approve?
I've known Mr. Patterson for several years and feel he would be a very valuable source to the EDA. I believe he came from Mr. Lewis's district. So
Yeah.
I'll let him make the motion.
Mr. Lewis?
I would make a motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. We also have received an application from a Robert Kramer to the library board. Any comments? Or
I believe Mr. Kramer's here.
oh, okay, all right. Mr. Kramer, will you have anything to say or? Sir?
I moved here in April 2020 during COVID, but the most important thing is I graduated from Virginia Tech in 1967. I worked in New York City financial services company for 30 years. Retired as a senior vice president of the broker dealer. My first retirement was the Eastern Shore of Maryland, Kent County, Maryland, very similar to Rockbridge, except flat there. We had an opportunity to downsize, and we picked moving to Kendall here in Lexington. To be very candid with you, I've been going to Virginia Tech football games for 45 years, going up and down 81. And I couldn't have told you until 2018 how big Lexington was, 5,000 of 50,000. Love it here. I served on Board of Eastern Neck, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuge, Washington College Adult Lifelong Learning Board. I was a member and secretary of the Foundation for the Kent County Public Library. I really believe that a library says just about everything about a community. And in the time that the library's been open, been very pleased with it. My wife volunteers there, loading books. She's building muscle and everything. But that's about it. I'd be glad to answer any questions. Oh, by the way, I was coming to the meetings, and that's what I love to do. I went, very unusual. I went to the board, county commissioner meetings, Board of Education meetings, town meetings, public hearings for 14 years. And so this is my third meeting here. Last meeting, I saw that nobody had applied for the library board. So I thought that was a good way to get involved in the community.
Well, welcome to the area, and we're glad you're willing to step up and be involved. And with that, I'll entertain a motion. Motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Absolutely.
And a
Second.
second. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Ms. Ayers.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Congratulations, Mr. Kramer. We appreciate your service. Just a reminder, we still are looking for applications for the Building Code Board of Appeals. And with that, I think I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, we got board comments? Oh, I'm sorry. Staff reports. Has everyone had a chance to review the staff reports?
Make a motion to approve as presented.
We have a motion to approve the staff reports as presented. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
And a second. Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Chair votes yes, and please tell the staff we appreciate all their hard work. Any board comments? And then we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
And do we have a second?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. McDaniel?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
The board and chair votes yes, and the board is adjourned.
Absolutely.